Here we go. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is 11/11, so January 11th, 2025. And this morning we have Washington State GOP Chairman Jim Walsh here. The legislative session is about to start, and crazy amount of bills pre-filed. A crazy amount of bills. We've got somebody told me that they thought that it was gonna cap, go over 700 or 800, and I was just like, ah. The other day I checked, it was 300. Then I checked again, it's over 400. It's an insane amount of bills. I don't know how you guys keep up with all of them, except for probably some amazing staff. And welcome this morning. Come and chat about all of that. And I'm going to just let you take it from there.
Well, thanks. Good morning, Teagan. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it is Saturday as we're having this conversation before the Monday start of the next legislative session in Olympia. Yeah, lots of pre-filed bills. 400 heading toward 500, and it's more than usual. I think this has something to do with the fact that there's so much change in Olympia going on. But as much as things change, I'm not sure they're really changing all that much. There will be a new governor and a new executive administration in the governor's office. There are new leaders in the majority caucus in the state Senate. The same leadership, or roughly the same leadership on the Republican side, the minority caucus, but new leaders in the state Senate for the Democrats. In the state House, the speaker remains the same, Representative Jenkins out of Tacoma, but other leaders around her are different, new. Not exactly new to the legislature, of course, but new in their positions, some of them. And a number of new committee chairs in both the state Senate and the state House. Quite a bit of turnover among the membership of the Republican and Democrat caucuses. So you're seeing new chairs, new ranking members on committees. And in the first weeks of the legislative session, of course, the focus is on the committee work. I mean, that's where bills kind of get their workouts, they get amended, they get modified, they get pushed and pulled and reshaped and refocused. The committee hearings are also where the public has its best chance to be heard in the legislative process. Most hearings on bills are open to the public and have time, at least for a limited amount, of public comment. And a number of organizations and a number of individuals have started to get very effective at
Hope I didn't lose you. Okay, it looks like, I don't know if everyone can still hear Jim, but there you are. I lost you for a minute.
ah, but there's just more of that. There's more of the online comment and stating of opinion, and I think that is increasingly useful. So there'll be a lot of action in the early weeks, mostly the committee hearings initially, and as people have been discussing already in advance of the session that starts Monday. Year budget cycle. And then the transportation budget, smaller and heavily funded with federal money. So it's hard really to sort of break out the state portion of transport.
Did I freeze? I still hear you,
It's
Jim.
like crossover.
Yeah, it's you break up every once in a while, but only for a minute, or not even a minute. It's just a few seconds. But
Sound now. There was some kind of crossover signal. I'm not sure what it was.
okay.
Can
Okay.
you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you now.
I I don't know if that was a phone call or a car driving by or what it was, but something interrupted. Um, uh, so yeah, three budgets: the operating budget, the biggest; the transportation budget, smaller; and then the capital, sometimes called capital construction budget, the smallest of the three. The capital construction budget, the smallest one, is actually the most bipartisan. It is funded primarily by state bonds, so it is a little bit independent of the other two budgets, and like I say, normally negotiated in a very bipartisan way. The
And
transportation,
quick
go
question
ahead.
on that one. So on that one, is that usually where like the small towns and cities, when they're trying to do some capital projects, is that mostly where that money is coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. A significant chunk of the capital budget are the so-called LCPs, local community projects. And those happen all over the state, in every county, but they do really try to give smaller communities more representation in that particular budget bucket. And that, yeah, that's where you fund maybe the creation of a park or the improvements to a park, restrooms, public space, that kind of thing. That's funded through local community projects in the capital budget. The capital budget also pays for school construction. And really, that's the largest, or at least it should be the largest piece of the capital budget. But the capital budget also funds a lot of homeless housing projects and housing projects in general. And lately, that's been a growing piece of the capital budget. Uh, and that's okay. But I believe that that school construction segment really ought to be the largest single piece of the capital budget. There are other things. Some of the environmental uh, sort of projects, reclamation projects, development projects are included in capital budget, but not the fish barrier replacements. Those are covered primarily out of the transportation budget. Um, Moving over to the transportation budget, it is another separate budget in our state government, separate of the main operating budget. And as the name implies, it covers both the operating and capital costs of our transportation system in the state. So roads and bridges primarily, their maintenance and their building, but also the ferry system is funded out of the transportation budget. And the biggest chunk of the state patrol's budget comes out of the transportation budget, as well as a large chunk of the Department of Licensing's budget comes out of the transportation budget. The transportation budget is both operating funds and capital funds, so it's a little unique in that way. And as I said, a big piece of the money that flows through the transportation budget is actually pass-through money that the federal government pays to the state to do development and maintenance work, of course, on interstate highways and other federally related projects. So a big piece of that overall budget comes from the federal government. But the biggest of the three budgets by far is the state's operating budget. And that, as I mentioned before, currently clocks in at about $70 billion for each 2-year budget cycle. And the operating budget funds just about everything else. So the operating monies to K-12 schools, operating monies to the universities that are funded by the state, a lot of health care and mental health care expenditures, everything that goes through Apple Care and the state's health care authority, as well as all the operating expenses of the various state agencies. So the Department of Commerce, Labor and Industry, L&I, Department of Ecology, Fish and Wildlife, corrections, uh, children, youth, and families, all the agencies of the state government are funded through the operating budget. So the other thing to remember is in Olympia, with the state government, we operate on a 2-year budget cycle. So every odd numbered year, and this is 2025, we are negotiating the next 2-year budget cycle. So the budget term that we're negotiating now starts with the fiscal year that begins in the fall of 2025 and goes through the early fall of 2027. That's what we will be negotiating in this session. There's been a lot of media and a lot of hype around this talking point that the state government is in deficit with its budgets. You've probably heard or read stories that say the state is in a $8 billion or $10 billion or $12 billion budget deficit. These are estimates and they are projections. At the moment, there is no budget deficit, but if we keep increasing spending in Olympia as we have for the past 10 years, at some point, about 4 years out, we will go into red ink. We will go into deficit. And so the challenge for the state legislature, and remember, the state legislature is who writes state budgets in the state. The governor's office always requests budgets, but the governor doesn't write the budget. The legislature writes the budget. So the challenge for the legislature in this session, and the reason why there's going to be so much focus on budgets and taxes, is I believe, and other fiscal conservatives believe, that if we make smart decisions about the budgets we're writing right now, we can shrink or erase that projected deficit that's 3 or 4 years out. And it's my opinion, we don't even need really to cut any of our state government spending. If we just hold it where it is currently, based on the 2-year cycle that's just ending, we can erase, at least reduce that projected deficit significantly. The reason there's a projected deficit is those projections assume that Washington State will continue to expand and grow its government spending at the rate that it has the last 10 years. We don't need to do that. I believe that we can fully fund all of the essential purposes of government by holding steady at the budget levels we are in the most recent 2-year period, just not growing it, just not expanding it. But there are a lot of progressive colleagues of mine in Olympia who believe that government must grow and grow by double digits in its spending every year. So there's going to be a real reckoning about these two different perspectives on budgets. The new incoming governor, Mr. Ferguson, has indicated, at least and he's not even governor yet, that happens on Monday, has indicated he's going to take a little bit more of a conservative fiscal view on the budgets. I don't know how well that will actually hold up, but at least his early comments seem to be promising. He is saying that he also thinks that with holding steady and maybe making a few surgical cuts, we can erase that projected deficit. This is bad news to the far left in Olympia, who really want to keep growing spending and raise new taxes to cover the new spending. And I believe a lot of the media hype around these projected deficits is designed to justify new taxes and tax increases, which I oppose.
Well, thank you for that. I have a quick, so most Republicans in office right now in the legislature, they oppose any new taxes. And over the last year, there's been something trickling down that started with the WSBA, Washington State Bar Association, in regards to caseload standards and for public defense. And that is being considered with the Supreme Court. And there have been several several public hearings. There's another meeting, administrative hearing at the end of the month. They've actually asked for some fiscal information, which is actually interesting because at the two hearings that they've had, there was a comment made that it's not their job to finance public defense. It's their job to uphold the Constitution. And so for them to even ask for any information was like in the notes, I'm like, wow, they're actually considering this. But there was a couple comments that if the public defense caseload standards changed to the level that was being requested, it would be in the first year, the initial ask statewide would be a $40 to $60 million ask just for public defense. And this is indigent defense. So these are people that walk into court and they've broken the law. They're having their hearing and the judge says, "Can you afford an attorney?" And they say no. And they fill out a little form, they sign it, and doesn't matter if they're lying, they're telling the truth. They signed the form. That's what they have to go off of. And they get a free attorney to represent them in their case, which I totally
Well, it's not free. It's free to them.
It's free
Someone's
to
paying
them. Yes, free to them. Taxpayers pay for it. And now here we are with another individual, so now we need another attorney, there's another case, another attorney, and this happens every day, all day long, where judges are appointing public defenders, and the load is huge. It's amazing. The right to a speedy trial has been what has been under the, that's what caused this whole thing. And people are tired of their hearings getting pushed off for 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. And so I understand the why this is all happening. But at the same time, when we're talking about numbers and we're talking about budget and we're talking about taxes, as $40 to $60 million ask for something that wasn't being asked for before, that's huge. What's that going to look like when that comes across someone's desk in Olympia?
It's going to be very difficult to fully fund it at that level. But remember, as I mentioned, the operating budget for a 2-year cycle is $70 billion. So there is room in that budget to fund, public defenders more. There's a lot to unpack in this matter of public defenders and their workloads. I'll say at the start, it's a real issue. Public defenders' workloads are very high. I don't think any reasonable person disagrees with that. What's happening in Olympia is some radical legislators and activist groups who aren't even legislators have grabbed this issue and are using it for what, in my opinion, is a bad faith purpose. What they want to do is effectively defund the judicial system. Their efforts, it's the same groups that wanted to defund the police a few years ago. They've turned their focus from police departments onto the state court system, the superior court system particularly. And they have decided what they're going to do is through lawsuit and through political engagement with organizations like the State Bar Association, they are going to make outrageous demands on the court system under the color of defending the constitutional rights of criminal defendants and bankrupt the system. So they've moved their defund the police focus and effort essentially to a defund the court effort. And it's kind of clever. It's kind of like Saul Alinsky politics. They found a point of vulnerability in a system they disagree with, and they're blowing up that point of vulnerability. The point of the vulnerability being the workloads that public defenders have. So some of it is a good faith recognition that public defenders have very high caseloads, and we need to do something about that. But some of the rhetoric and the more extreme comments being made about this matter are not good faith. They are a partisan ideological effort to basically jam up the courts and put the courts in a position where criminal defendants will need to have charges against them dropped because, according to these radicals, the courts are not providing speedy enough trials. They aren't providing enough free lawyers who aren't really free lawyers. The taxpayers pay for them. And it's a way to basically screw up the court system and decriminalize criminal behavior. So I oppose that. What we're going to have to find on a policy ground is the right space with the right amount of new resource to the public defender systems that they can manage caseloads in a reasonable way. And yes, the right to a timely trial is a constitutional right, so that has to be recognized. But we cut out of the policy conversation the bad faith arguments that are designed just to screw up the court system. So that will take some work on a policy level. And then once we've found the right sweet spot where we are, funding better by policy, the court system and the public defenders without going crazy to the left wing and screwing up the courts, then it's the matter of finding the money. I don't know that the number would be 40 to 50 million. I think it might be less than that, but let's say for the sake of argument, it is 40 million. I think this is a priority of our budget system and the operating budget. The money that the state government provides to the superior court systems and other courts around the state. And we're just going to have to find that $40 million somewhere. And that means some other project is not going to get that $40 million. Now, generally, when we talk about prioritizing expenditures of government, you hear, again, a lot of hair on fire rhetoric. Oh, you can't defund homeless housing. You can't defund community outreach. Well, we spend so much money on homeless housing and sort of a generalized set of community outreach efforts at state government that we don't have to defund them. We still fund those efforts, but maybe we pare them back a bit here and there and find $20 million or $40 million that we can allocate to additional money spent on public defenders. Budgets are about priorities. It's about what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. And when you write a budget effectively, it's usually not meat axe cuts to operations of the government. Usually it's scalpel cuts. It's you move a little bit from here, a little bit from here, a little bit from here, and then move that over there. And this is where there is good staff in Olympia that helps do this, but ultimately it comes down to the legislatures to parse out and negotiate thousands of line items, small points in the budget, and make sure they're calibrated in the best way.
Well, it sounds like you are well well in tune with how this is going to work and what needs to be done in order to help resolve this issue. It's not easy. It's this as much as people are for or against, or even hearing the public comments at the hearings were very much like you just said. There's actual good faith comments that are being made and constructive comments. And then there's that whole other politicized comments that are not good faith and just want it all to go away. And it's disheartening because at the same time, when there is a victim and you have someone that's not able to go through the trial system because or the court system, because there's not enough attorneys and it gets dismissed. That victim sitting back going, what happened? And I think victims are getting left behind in a lot of things. And it's nice to hear representatives that are going to try to keep this system in place, and in the end, I mean, it helps support those victims, and so.
Yeah, the radical
But
left has very
moving on.
it's true. They push ideological agenda with little regard for victim advocacy or victim rights, and that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, they do. And I could be on here with you for several hours talking about the court system, judicial system, our law enforcement, everything, which I am pro. I feel that there's a system and it could be a very good system, but it needs some help and some tweaks, and we have I feel like we have a crisis with our jails, statewide, nationwide, probably. And there's been a lot of things in regards to keeping drugs out of the jails, especially lately with an RCW that went into place a couple years ago, and then a pilot program, and that developed a WAC that is giving all the jails in the state right now a little bit of headache in regards to keeping their scanners operational so that they can keep drugs out of the jails. And that one kind of blew up this week. And hopefully DOH and some good representatives and a few good senators are gonna keep DOH's feet to the fire on that one, and work with the jails statewide and make sure that they can keep on using those machines and keep drugs out of the jails. And not holding my breath, but that's hopefully.
Yeah, Washington State Department of Health has disappointed me time and time again in the last 5 or 6 years. I believe that Washington State Department of Health has become heavily politicized. Some would even say weaponized in pushing radical policy that may not be for the greater good of the general population. We saw it a lot in its hysterical approach to certain public health issues. And here it is again, the bureaucrats at the State Department of Health involved in jail business. The State Department of Health has said that the scanners that jails use to detect many things, but primarily drugs that inmates or visitors or others are trying to sneak into jails, pose a health threat to the people being scanned. Now, there may be some element of truth in that. You need to watch kind of the radiation levels and the ambient health effects of scanning anyone. If you've ever been to the airport, you will see there are some people who request to not go through a scanner at the security perimeter of an airport and have to be physically patted down. That's an option in that world. In jails, it is not a practical option to pat people down. They need the scanners to see if people are sneaking things in. Drugs being sneaked into jails in our state and all around the country is a major problem. We've seen in a number of county jails around Washington, and state prisons too, but really, I think most of them have been in county jails. People overdosing, inmates overdosing primarily on fentanyl in the jail. So how's the fentanyl getting into the jail? Well, various ways. And I mean, this gets to some old school jail and prison maintenance stuff. People coming in, most often inmates, sometimes visitors, will literally hide drugs in their bodies as they come into the jail. And once they're in, extract the package from their body, and they have drugs to use while they're in jail. And as most people know by now, fentanyl is particularly dangerous because the dosage of a pill or a bit of powder is all over the place. Uh, uh, it's very unpredictable. A pill may make you high and make you feel better for the night, or a pill may kill you because of the concentration, because of the dosage of the fentanyl in the pill. It is very erratic, and unlike marijuana or even cocaine or other drugs, heroin, methamphetamine, an overdose of fentanyl can kill a person on the spot. And I guess they all can in some way, but it's more common with fentanyl. It's so toxic. Um, and so we've seen people overdosing inside the jails and the prisons. So the scanners that prisons use are a way to fight this, and they're pretty effective, but they do have a radiation impact, just like if you have a bunch of X-rays do. Uh, Again, I think there's a good faith question to be raised about using these tools to find drugs hidden inside people's bodies. But I think some bad faith players have hijacked the issue. It's similar to the public defender issue we just talked about. And I think what some of the bad faith actors are doing is they're trying to screw up the jails. They're trying to make things difficult for the jails so that effectively we de-incarcerate criminal populations. And some of the radical left legislators in Olympia speak openly. They do not believe in prisons and jails. They think they should not exist. They believe in a left-wing theory called community corrections, in which people never go to jail. When someone commits a crime, they are admonished by the court, you committed a crime, and they are sent back to wherever they came from, wherever they live, to report into the government from time to time what they're up to. And this is an ideological belief, I think a foolish one. Part of the criminal justice system is designed to get people out of the circumstances they were in when they committed crimes. Get them out of the neighborhood they came from, get them away from other people who are bad influences on them. Sometimes that is for the criminal's own good. Their best chance at getting rehabilitation and getting back on a better track in life is to get away from the place where they got in trouble. So this is going to go back and forth, but some of the concern about these scanners and some of the bureaucrats at the Department of Health who have no experience in corrections, no experience in court systems, they are ideologues, left-wing ideologues, bureaucrats in that state agency, the Department of Health, are insinuating themselves into the operations of jails and prisons. And frankly, they don't know what they're talking about.
Agreed. Agreed. I think it's going to be very interesting how that moves on, and hopefully hopefully it works out okay so they can still continue to use them. So I'm gonna go back to how we started in regards to the legislative session this year. We're over 400 bills now. Is that correct?
Yeah, and more coming. The pre-filed bills are usually just the appetizer. The real meal comes once the session starts. So yeah, if we had 400 pre-filed bills, I mean, we're likely to have a multiple of that are filed during the session. Pre-filed bills are often a combination of bills that are serious and priorities for the caucuses and the legislators, with bills that are more statement bills, bills that are filed early to set a narrative frame or a frame of debate around an issue. So not every pre-filed bill necessarily becomes law, and not every bill at any time necessarily becomes law. Some of those early pre-filed bills are designed to start conversations or influence other legislation that may come along later.
I noticed there was a bill for Kimchi Day.
Not a priority of this legislator, or I think either of the caucuses.
I was I think years being involved in politics, I was a representative and people that watch that, and um I call us political geeks. And we keep an eye on all of those bills, and some of them were just like, oh, they're just trying to waste our time now. Like and but
I've
yeah,
had a
there's
I've had a pet peeve about the number of specialty license plate bills that come up. We spend a lot of time in the legislature reviewing and discussing bills that create specialty license plates. And these things are sometimes called hero bills. It's an easy bill that a legislator can go back to their district and say, hey, look, I got we love football. We love Seahawks license plate made. I'm a big Seahawks fan. And there's nothing wrong with specialty license plates, but our standard in Olympia has been each one requires its own bill to be created. And I've argued we should just, every year, we should wrap them all up, the specialty license plates, into one action and just vote on that one quickly and get it done with. Same goes for Kimchi Day. Same goes for State Dinosaur. I mean, you can do these bills and it's fun. And sometimes, school kids will make the suggestion and legislators want to seem like they're in touch with the youth or something. But it's not a great use of our time, no.
right, yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys are able to focus on the ones that are going to matter to us most, and get I don't know how you guys keep when there's 400, 600, 800 bills, and sometimes, I mean, I know they get split up in committees, and each committee is working on some different bills, and you have your process. But that's a lot of bills. Very long days and very long nights. So
I mean, I read a lot of bills, Teagan, but some members don't. You don't have to read every bill. As you mentioned, the main sort of division of labor is the various committees, and each legislator in Olympia serves usually on 3 or 4 policy committees. That's where you dig deeper into the details of bills. And so each member usually knows in detail the bills that have been uh, considered by the committees that that member serves on, and then counts on colleagues who are on the other committees to give informed opinion about those other bills and the other committees. But some of us do read all the bills or try to, and certainly the Speaker's office does prioritize. They publish lists of bills they're called run lists or run sheets. They're most likely to be heard at a committee ahead of time. So you can read those committee run lists and you can see which bills are most likely to get hearings and get discussion. And then you can basically start with those. And at the end or at the key deadlines within each legislative session, some bills don't make the cut. They don't get a committee hearing. They don't get to the floor for a vote. And those go into the X file, so-called. And you try to avoid the bills that are likely to end up in the X file, the round file, because those are the ones that are not going to be in play. So there are ways you can nuance it and try to keep your focus on bills that are most likely to get through committees and get to the floor.
we've been on for almost an hour. I have one last question for you. What are like the
Sure.
top two bills that you um are worried about, and the top two that you are really hoping that pass?
Good question. I would say at this point, the bills to watch out for and to be worried about are mostly the new tax bills. There was a proposal last session to increase the rate of speed at which property taxes can be raised. And I think property taxes are already too high in this state. but it is clear that my colleagues on the left wing want to raise property taxes even higher. So that one, it's complicated, but the proposal would raise one part of a property tax calculation, your tax bill, 3 times as fast as it can rise right now. And that would be devastating to a lot of homeowners. There are other tax proposals I don't like. A proposal to raise the business and occupation tax that I think will kill small businesses and make larger businesses move out of state. Inslee's so-called wealth tax, the new governor has already indicated he doesn't support it, so that one's likely dead already, and that's a good thing. Out of tax world, there are a couple of troubling bills. One makes homelessness a protected class in the eyes of the law, so that people who were camping in public spaces could not be prosecuted for trespassing or public inebriation or other such crimes. I think our homeless problems in this state are bad, and they would only get worse if that proposal were passed. There are a couple of bad proposals about K-12 school curriculum that would further move our K-12 schools toward indoctrination instead of education. So I don't like those. But I would say the tax bills are the most worrisome. On the flip side, things that are good, my colleague Travis Couture has a very good bill that would begin a process of school choice in Washington, and it's structured in a way that does not rob any resources from school districts. In fact, if this form of school choice were put into place, it might even add to the per pupil budgets that school districts have. So it's very well crafted, very cleverly written, and would be a good reform in K-12 education. There are other good bills. I mean, I have a bill that would move the mature minor doctrine in this state. This is the threshold age at which a minor child can receive medical care or mental health care without parental consent. Currently, there's a patchwork of when those ages trigger, and they are as early as 13 or 14 years old that a child can receive medical care without parental consent. This bill would move that to a uniform 17 years old. That if a child is 17, they can receive medical care without parental consent, but if they're 16 or younger, to receive either physical or mental health care treatments, they would need to have parental consent. There are a few carve-outs for situations in which the child's life is in danger, but generally, parental consent would be required. And there are some good bills basically supporting law enforcement in this state. And those counter some bad bills that are attacking law enforcement. So I would say the bad ones are tax related. The good ones are education reform and parental rights.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I have a feeling in the next few weeks, I mean, there's always bills that come up that are just like, absolutely, we need all the help we can get because we need to kill this. And how are people going to know when that happens?
Well,
Do
just,
you?
yeah. I mean, social media is great for this. I mean, the kind of lives that you're doing are great for it. There are a number of groups, the caucuses, the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans are doing more social media outreach. Little segments, sometimes very short, talking about good bills and bad bills. And they now tend to include a link at the bottom of each of them or in the comments under them that let you click through and do that online testifying we talked about. Where just online, you can go to the website and say, I like this bill or I don't like this bill. And you can leave a short comment. This bill is terrible. I have kids, it would hurt my kids, something like that. So there's more of that going on. I think social media is a very good tool for giving people the ability with a couple of clicks of their phone or their computer to get involved. And I think there's a lot of that that's going to be going on this year.
Right on. So you have a Facebook page as well, so people can jump on there and follow yours. You have your Q&As, and then we have Facebook for caucus, and I think just about every representative has, or they all do have websites. So anyone watching can start following all of those, and if you want to be really bombarded on social media, follow all of them. And but I want to thank you very much for joining this morning, and hopefully we'll have you on again, and we'll all have the Facebook Live situated so we can do that and take some questions. And thank you very much for being a representative and going out there and fighting the good fight.
Well, good to talk to you, team. Have a good couple of days, and the show in Olympia starts again Monday, January 13th. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, it does. Good luck, and thank you very much. You have a great day.
You too.